Journalists, sponsored by the Dow Jones Foundation. Today we're going to be talking to you about Twitter for journalists. So in the spirit of Twitter and social media, instead of doing it myself and just being the sole talking head here, I've invited two people to help us out, because one of the points about Twitter is it's a massively useful tool for crowdsourcing stuff. And the other thing to remember about Twitter is that Twitter is cleverer than you are. So no matter what you can bring to a discussion, there's always going to be somebody on Twitter who can add to it, amplify it, and make it better. So I'm just going to share a screen with you. And well, let me tell you who we are first. So I'm Chris Roper. I'm a senior Knight Fellow with the ICFJ and with Code for Africa. And I work on data journalism teams around in 4 or 5 countries in Africa. And I'm the ex-editor-in-chief of the Mail and Guardian. So a lot of my Twitter experience will be drawn from being the editor-in-chief of the Mail and Guardian. And then with me is Ray. Perhaps you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Raymond Joseph. I'm a journalist based in Cape Town. I'm also an ICFJ Knight Fellow. And I'm currently involved in a project setting up a data journalism newsroom in Cape Town. In fact, Africa's first one.
And then with us, possibly just in spirit because we're having problems connecting with her, is Haji Dorji, who's the ex-social media editor at the Mail and Guardian, and also the ex-deputy news editor for Online. And she's here because, as my social media editor, she made some very interesting mistakes, which she'll be telling us about. Perhaps the most pathetic was when she tweeted from the official Mail and Guardian account. And the Mail and Guardian is a big investigative newspaper in South Africa. When she tweeted, I really miss Cape Town, which is not the kind of thing you want to do to a Joburg-based newspaper and to its audience, but she'll have way worse examples. So I'm just going to share a screen with you now and talk you through what we're actually going to be doing today. And by the way, we are under a bridge in Cape Town, which is why behind it looks like a decrepit shack. And it might get a little bit noisy every now and then, so please forgive us. Okay. Whoa, hang on a sec. Sorry, I'm just going to be with you right now. Technology. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen with you. Right, so today we're going to be talking about Twitter for journalists. I'm assuming you can see my good Twitter bird and my evil Twitter bird now. If you have any questions, please tweet us and use the hashtag ICFJDigital, and then our handy and lovely assistant in Washington, Jefferson Mock, will harvest those questions and address them to us. Right, so what am I talking about today? So I'm going to first give you a kind of a brief sort of overview of how I see Twitter working in newsrooms and for the news industry. And then Raymond's going to be talking you through some very practical tools and practical applications. So I'll start off talking about what's wrong with Twitter, and then I'll talk about what's right with Twitter, and then we'll be asking the question, is Twitter true? And that'll be Ray talking you through some verification tools and showing you some tricks of the trade. And I'm going to give you in fact, before Ray does it, I'll probably give you my 5 rules of Twitter, which I've just made up and are slightly tongue-in-cheek, but are still pretty applicable. Okay, so let me first give you an example of what's wrong with Twitter. So a week or so ago, we learned that our president was spending 2 billion rand on a new aeroplane in a country where I think the average per capita income is like $1,000 a month or something. No? A month. So as you can appreciate, a bit of a problem to spend that much money on a new aeroplane. We have a television broadcaster called the SABC, which is the state broadcaster, and this is how they signaled they broke the news about the new VIP jet for our president to their readers. 4 billion rand VIP jet for Zuma, and they tweeted a news story and then added the phrase "what the fuck" in uppercase and with loads of exclamation marks. Obviously, straight after that,
in the wrong account.
The SABC published an apology saying, we apologize for an earlier. The V was done by someone without authority to be on our account. Obviously, not true, because how do you get into a Twitter account if you don't have authority? Clearly, somebody had thought they were in their private account and tweeted this on the SABC account. So that's one of the pitfalls of Twitter. You can often say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and then you're going to need to make some apologies for it. But what's right with Twitter? So for me, Twitter is one of the great tools of journalism, and something that every news journalist should be using. In fact, in newsrooms I've managed, I've actually had a rule where journalists have to spend a certain percentage of their day on social media. Some very old-fashioned newsrooms will, in fact, ban things like block things like Facebook to their journalists. I mean, they're one of the biggest media houses in South Africa does just that. They have Facebook blocked, which is really kind of counterintuitive and not in the best interests of journalists. So some of the super obvious things that are right about Twitter. First thing is that news industry is being squeezed more and more, certainly in South Africa, but all over the world. And Twitter opens up a whole new raft of resources for you. It's a great tool to source stories, to check stories, and to write stories as well. Obviously, there are a bunch of caveats to that, and Ray will probably talk you through that in a little while. Okay. One of the other great things about Twitter is that it brings you more traffic. Not just more traffic to your stories. It doesn't just amplify your access to your current readers. It also brings you new readers. So the numbers are a bit hazy in my head, but I think that about 3 or 4 years ago, social media became our biggest referral of new visitors to our site, overtaking Google. And before that, Google had been the king of that for many, many years. And one of the things that's possibly not that obvious is that you don't really have a choice about this. One of the great things about Twitter is you can now pursue your readers onto the platforms where they've migrated. The traffic to news sites is a complicated thing. It's not just about the number of page views or the number of uniques. It's also about the attention and the engagement, and more that's going to be the business model for journalism going forward. Measuring engagement, measuring how passionate your users are about your brand, and then on-selling that passion and loyalty to advertisers or to your own events companies or whatever. So that's the great thing about Twitter. You're following your reader, and really you don't have a choice. If you're not following them, and if you're not becoming one with them, you are going to be losing out, both in the sense of telling the right stories, but also in the sense of actually having stories to tell and having people to tell stories to. Okay, so what's wrong with Twitter? First of all, and a shout out to my American overlords at the ICFJ, it's an American company which now owns your data. And so that's on the level of the Edward Snowden kind of privacy aspect as well. But more importantly for us as journalists trying to turn an honest buck, or at least a buck, is that once you've set up a whole system of talking to your readers and your readers being part of an open newsroom and of how you produce journalism, and you're doing that on Twitter, if Twitter changes something, basically the business model you painstakingly built will be screwed. So you've got to be aware of that. I mean, it's still a massively more positive thing to be on Twitter than not, but it's something to bear in mind. One of the other things that's a possible pitfall on Twitter is that you tend to think that Twitter is the world. And in fact, not everyone is on Twitter. And those who are on Twitter for a different sense of what that means. Some people just dip in and out. Some people follow very few other people. And many people aren't actually on Twitter at all. So your perspective can become quite skewed. I mean, there are many stories I've seen in South African media lately about public opinion, and actually, in fact, it's not public opinion. It's just a bunch of people on Twitter, and every person in every different market, every journalist has to understand what part of his or her audience is on Twitter. So it's obviously quite an elitist platform in some ways. So it's up to you to work out who am I talking to on Twitter, who's part of my audience, and which parts of my audience am I not reaching, and how do I reach them on other platforms. Another big problem with Twitter is that it can make you very lazy as a journalist. It's the same kind of laziness that journalists show when they have a few numbers in their little black book of people who they always phone for comment. Twitter does not replace getting out into the world and doing real, feet on the ground journalism. It does not replace it. It augments it. It amplifies it. It does other things which are really, really valuable, but it's only a part of what great journalism is. Okay. The other thing is that Twitter can lie to you. Don't trust that bird. So, what you gauge as public opinion can sometimes not actually be public opinion, because it's always going to be funneled through who you're following and who you've accessed and what kind of lists you've made. And then obviously the other quite obvious way that Twitter can lie to you is by just lying to you. So Ray is going to take you through a whole bunch of tests and tools you can use to check veracity and validity of what Twitter tells you. And then the other thing is that Twitter will be gone eventually. So some other big social media platform will probably replace it. So you've got to be ready for that. You can't just become a Twitter expert now. You've got to be on all social media platforms. Okay, so just a couple of things to remember before we get into the 5 golden rules, and then Ray will start talking you through some tools. First thing is that it's a question of ethics on Twitter. You need to be aware that Twitter and social media, there's no fundamental difference between social media, which is a subset of online journalism, and traditional journalism. The same rules and the principles apply. The only thing that's different is in how fast your turnaround time is, the different kind of pressures that come from that, and the things you're producing. So you would never be trying to tell a story in 140 characters on the pages of a newspaper or on the pages of your website. So the quality of the way you're expressing, the form that you're expressing your journalism in changes. That's what changes. But so the quality gets to be defined differently. What's a good piece of journalism on Twitter is not a good piece of journalism on a website or in a newspaper. But the professionalism stays the same. You have to stick to the same standards on Twitter and social media that you would in the pages of your newspaper. So, this is just kind of a summary of what's useful about Twitter again. You can source breaking news, story ideas, you can break news, you can verify news, but the most important bit is that you can use your community as a sounding board. What was the most read part of a newspaper before the advent of digital journalism was probably the letters page. That is the place where people reached out to you and you started to understand your audience. That's what the great thing about Twitter is. You can use it to understand if you are talking to your audience properly and if you're giving them what they need. So there are three A's that I like to think about as the kind of cornerstones, if you can have letters as cornerstones of Twitter. That's authority, attribution, and authenticity. Authenticity, perhaps the most important for me. So when you are sourcing material on Twitter, you've got to make sure people know who you are. Okay, it's the same as what you would be doing in a normal journalistic interaction. You've got to include your name and your company name when you're asking questions. You've got to be aware that you're part of a community. You've got to be authentic within that community. If you're not going to get the right kind of information, and you're not going to get the right kind of credibility that you want. Don't ever misrepresent yourself on social media. You cannot trick people on social media. You've got to tell them who you are. I mean, the way you understand Twitter and the way a person using Twitter understands it might be entirely different. I mean, I just suddenly think back to when the Economic Freedom Front, which is a small but very vocal political party in South Africa, when they discovered that there was a parody account of their gracious leader, Julius Malema, they sent out a press release demanding that the South African government closed down Twitter. Absolute lack of understanding of where Twitter actually exists in the world. And they were very, very upset. About 2 years later, the person who ran that parody account actually handed it over to the leader of that party, who now runs that account himself. The funny thing is, he didn't lose any of the people who were following the parody account to laugh, because the things he says are as equally absurd as the parody account. But the point is, I actually forgotten the point, now I'm thinking about Julius Malema. The point is, you've got to be authentic. The other part of authenticity is the authenticity of the actual of your audience, of the people you're talking to and who are talking to you. So, what I was going to say was that sometimes people, they don't actually understand what a public platform Twitter is. People who use it, they really do believe it's kind of a closed universe in the way that Facebook can be. So you've got to be very careful of that. You've got to make absolutely sure that if you've taken a story from somebody's Twitter feed, that you keep a record. Take snapshots of the page, bookmark it, make sure you keep a record of that kind of thing. Attribution is the second A of my 3 A's. Also very, very important. You have the illusion that information on social media is for everybody, and in a sense it is. But as a journalist, it's still up to you to make sure that you are attributing sources properly. You can't just, I mean, even if I retweet somebody and take out a word or correct the grammar, I make sure it's marked as a PRT, a partial retweet, just to make absolutely sure that nobody can come back to me and say, actually, you misquoted me, you lied, and that kind of thing. You've got to be very, very careful to attribute. And then another thing to be wary of is that as you are mining Twitter for data, people can be mining you as well and mining your data. So you could be doing a story on, I'm going to give you a South African example, on the opposition party in South Africa, the Democratic Alliance, which means you suddenly one day decide to follow 20 people who are part of the Democratic Alliance. Somebody can come along and look and say, look, this person has only been following the opposition party. This is why they're so anti-government. And then construct a story around your social media data, which might be true or might not be true, but either way, you've given them the opportunities. You have to be very, very careful about that kind of thing, about actually taking a step back and looking at how you are moving through the social media landscape as well. And be very careful to watch your back about that. Yeah, I mean, I guess that I've probably spoken enough about these attributes, these 3 A's, for you to get the idea. If you have any kind of questions about this, I've taken a lot of what I've said now from a social media policy that I wrote for the Mail and Guardian. So if you want to see this in full, you can go to mg.co.za, and then at the bottom of the page, you'll see the link to the social media policy. So these are my 6 rules of Twitter. First one is, ask not what Twitter can do for you, ask what you can do for Twitter, to quote JFK. If you're just dipping into Twitter to use it and then to leave again, like one of those CNN helicopter journalists, you are not going to get full value, and you're not going to get people following you, and you're not going to get the right kind of credibility in the community. You've got to be part of the flow of information there, and an active player on Twitter. This goes for all social media, of course. You've got to be retweeting your opposition newspapers. Many people look at me as if I'm crazy when I say this, but my policy has always been, on Twitter, people are going to follow you because you can tell them what's going on. If some other newspaper knew what was going on before your own one, tweet the link to that newspaper. Tweet it from your, I mean, you should tweet it from your actual newspaper brand as well, in my opinion, but there might be different ideas about that. Okay, rule number 2. It's a blue bird with a bird brain. Don't trust it. Okay, you get so seduced by the I mean, it's a social media. You are predisposed to trust the people that you follow and you've built trust with. But that trust has to be tested every single day. The fact that somebody has been a great, it's like basic journalism actually. The fact that somebody's been a great source for 2 years does not mean that every single time you get a leak from that person, you should be totally credulous about it. And then as a contrast to the don't trust Twitter, Twitter is actually cleverer than you are. There's nothing, which is why I've crowdsourced Ray and Haji to help me out with this talk. There's nothing that you are better at than Twitter. I mean, no matter what you know, there'll always be somebody on Twitter who knows something more than you do. So show it some respect and humility, I suppose. Rule number 4, Twitter's the beginning of a story. It's not the story. I can't tell you how sick I feel when I see stories in newspapers that are like a bunch of tweets stuck together. You know, that is not a story. I mean, that's like an overheard in a bar. Okay, for sure, use that stuff, but you've got to be adding analysis to it. You've got to be phoning somebody to check things. It's got to be a proper story. You can't just cobble together a bunch of things you saw on Twitter. Rule number 5, there's no difference between Twitter journalism and any other form of journalism. I think I said this earlier. Same rules, same ethical rigor, probably most importantly, the same respect for your readers that you should be showing in an editorial, in a newspaper, in a big data package on a website. You've got to be showing the same respect to your readers and followers on Twitter. Then rule number 6, there's a troll, there's some food, what do? Okay, you all think you know this rule. Don't feed the damn troll. You think you know it, but I bet you that every one of you out there, assuming there are people out there, every one of you out there has, at some stage or other, responded to a troll. No matter what you do, you will never be able to defeat a troll except by silence. Never feed the troll. Okay, so just before Ray gets into his bit, I just wanted to show you this. You probably can't see it properly on the screen, but it's a 5-step fact check that's put together by africacheck.org. It's a really, really brilliant pamphlet you can download on Africa Check and print out and put up on your wall. The most important part for us is the bottom bit. The most important part for us talking about Twitter, which is basically user-generated content, is this set of steps. I'm not going to go through them now because Ray's going to go through them in a different way. But do yourself a favor, go to Africa Check, download this. It's put together, I think, by @BrodyGull, if you want to follow her on Twitter. Make sure you put it up in your newsrooms and use it, or just put it up at home, because that's where many of you work from nowadays, thanks to things like Twitter. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Ray now. Just let me quickly check if we have any questions. Okay. Jeff, do we have any questions out there? I'm just going to go to my Twitter feed quickly.
I don't see.
Nope, it's all just people telling me I'm super clever. That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Ray. I'm just going to quickly go back to the screenshot. So this is what Ray is going to be talking about. I'm just going to talk you through it quickly. So the stuff in bold he's going to focus on because we only have half an hour left, and we still have to hear from Haji if she's fixed her tech problems. But basically these 9, I guess, documents about how to fact check are all sitting on that URL. So if you want to take that URL down, but otherwise Ray will tweet it.
I have tweeted.
Okay, he's tweeted already, so you can find that. Okay, it's on the Power Reporting website, I think. So we'll be concentrating on Twitter search, on how to verify a tweet, on using Twitter lists, and then perhaps you'll have time to go through the others.
So we're going to Twitter.
Okay, I'm just going to go to Twitter for Ray. My Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, hang in there, people.
So while this is, go to twitter.com, please.
Oh, okay.
So while this is happening, I just want to say, I think one of the most important thing about Twitter is the question you need to answer in your head is why you are on Twitter. And, you know, if you're on Twitter to tweet pictures about your food, so be it. But I would hope that everyone who's listening now is on Twitter for professional reasons as a journalist. So very importantly, make sure that you have a proper avatar and make sure that you've got a proper bio.
In fact, can I just talk about the avatar thing?
Sure.
There was this great tweet a couple of days ago, guy tweeting, one thing I've learned from Twitter is that eggs are really racist. So lose the egg.
Yeah, let's hatch. So I'm just going to go through a basic. Twitter's search has always been very iffy, but with tools like Topsy and other search tools, Twitter's had to up its game. So if you're having a look at the screen, in the search area, let's have a look at something very relevant, which is Paris. And we're going to go to the Paris attacks. So what Twitter is now allowing us to do is on the left-hand side, you're having a look, you're seeing different hashtags that are being used. And at the moment, we're looking at top tweets. So these are the tweets that are getting the most traction at the moment. So very often, these are the ones that are getting the most retweets. Very often, these are the ones that are coming from established media. The next one we're having a look at is live. And live is what we're looking at is the Twitter fire hose. So imagine if you've ever watched firemen putting out a fire. There's 3 or 4 of them hanging onto a hose pipe, which is spraying in all directions. The water's going in different directions. That's the fire hose. Very hard to aim. And the point being with Twitter is you really need to sort the news from the noise. Otherwise, you're going to struggle to find what you're looking for. So what we're now looking at is the live tweet stream on the Paris attacks. The next thing we're looking at is accounts. And these are all accounts that have the words, sorry, Chris, could you get me back to...
All right, you're not a Mac person. There you go. Okay. What do you want to do?
So, sorry guys, I'm not a Mac person, I'm a PC person, so that's fine. So what you're looking at the moment is all the accounts that have got Paris attacks in their name.
You want to go up to 2 fingers like that. Okay.
Next thing we can do is we can filter. So imagine now there's a breaking story in your area and you've done a search and you're now inside a hashtag. Immediately where it's taking me to is as you scroll down, is this is a pure stream of pictures only on Paris attacks. My next one is video only on Paris attacks. The top tweets and the live tweets are going to give you everything. It's going to give you stories, it's going to news, videos, it's going to give you the whole gamut. We then have more app options where we can go to all, which is going to give us a mix of everything. News. Which should be...
Tap it softly.
So that shouldn't be pictures only.
How do you find news?
Options.
So you go options. And then you go news, but it's not a PC, so you don't have to smack it.
Okay, sorry. so news is giving us again the tweets that are getting the top traction. What you're going to find there is people with quite large followings are getting a lot of retweets, and you're going to get newspapers. Go to the next option, please. Interesting one near you.
Where is it? Oh, there we go.
So what you can start doing with near you is if your location is switched on, what is happening now is we are sitting in Cape Town, and these are people close to us who are tweeting about Paris. So there's a journalist there, there's Cape Talk, which is a radio station. Now imagine that you're a journalist out at the scene of an incident. If people whose locations are switched on your phone, the moment you hit near you, you are going to get people close to where you are, and you suddenly are looking at people who may well have been sources, may well have been witnesses. So the first thing that you would do is when you find someone that you want to talk to on Twitter, your immediate default is to follow them, because the moment you followed them, they can send you a direct message. Follow them, send them a tweet, identify yourself, say I'm a journalist, please could you DM me your contact details. Very important. You're not going to ask someone to put their contact details out on public in Twitter. And the chances are you've got a source very close to you if the story is further afield. That's the way that you would be doing it. You can save the search, the Paris attacks, and now that Paris attacks, when you start typing in the search, it'll immediately come up. And then finally save, this advanced search. So I guess most of you at some time would have done a Google advanced search. So Twitter's got a really powerful advanced search. We're searching for all these words. We can search for an exact phrase, any of these words, none of these words. So for example, in South Africa, say we are searching for great white sharks. Now, sharks is also the name of a rugby team. So none of these words, if I was searching for great white and sharks, none of these words would be rugby. So that would get rid of all the rugby, anything related to rugby. You can search within a hashtag. Very important, any language. Twitter will default to the language, to your chosen language that you mostly use. So foreign language will come lower down. The reason we are using any language is Twitter does not recognize SMS language as English. And that's another thing. As a professional journalist, you shouldn't be using SMS. The next one, from these accounts to these accounts. For example, when Oscar Pistorius, the morning that Oscar Pistorius, the story broke that he had killed his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, sorry, the first thing I did is a search from @Oscar Pistorius to Reva Steenkamp. You can add mentioning the account if they're talking about someone. And what I got is a wealth of tweets. 24 hours later, that account had been sanitized. So what I did is your other default immediately should be is if you find something on Twitter that you want to keep, do a screen grab then and there. The chances are it's going to be deleted. We can also do a search near a place, a location. Just the one thing is when you're searching between accounts, Oscar Pistorius and Reva Steenkamp, flip it around between Reva Steenkamp and Oscar Pistorius. You will get different results. You can search within a location, near a place. So when you click on it, your location is not on. Yeah. You will be able to set it for Johannesburg, London, Istanbul, wherever you are. And then click in dates, inside dates there. So you can search between a time frame. If you're looking for a tweet that's happened within a time period, you can do a from and to. And then finally, interesting one, which I use occasionally when I'm going to go, the new movie has come out, I'll search for the movie's name and I can look for positive reviews, negative reviews. anyone who's asking a question about something, and including retweets. I normally get rid of retweets. What you really wanting to do is to go back and find the earliest tweet. The earlier the tweet, the more likely you are to be getting to a real source. Okay, the next tool, this is one of my favorite tools, which is a night tool. So the one thing that you want to do when a story breaks, the first thing you want to do is to find the hashtags that people are using. And people make up hashtags, people spell words wrong, and very often there are tweets that you could miss if you are not, if you don't know what they are. So let's say Paris arrest.
Sorry guys, I just want to quickly adjust. We apparently aren't seeing the actual presentation here.
Oh dear.
So let me just quickly see if I can go back there.
Sorry guys, tech is fantastic till it stops working.
Okay, hang on a sec. Oh dear. Whoa, that's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to have to break out of this. Just give me one moment. Okay.
So in between, Chris, while you're doing that, there's a couple of questions.
Okay, there we go.
Oh.
Nope, not working. Okay, guys, we're probably going to have to. Oh, hang on a sec. Okay, I think you guys can see this now. Unfortunately, it's not going to be perfect, but okay. Okay, I'm just going to. We're just going to carry on, and somebody will tweet me and tell me if we can actually see these things or not.
So let's go back to.
Okay, there we go.
So we're going to enter the search term Paris arrests. Won't you just type it in, Chris?
Okay.
Should you not be? There you go.
Yeah.
So this is your go-to tool for a breaking news story. And what we're seeing here is all on the right-hand side under hashtags are the various hashtags that people are using, which include the words Paris attack. So that's what it's searching around. The terms that are in the different tweets, which is not that important. The hashtags are most important, but what you need to be doing, go up. I need to go to the top of the screen.
There we go.
Is we need to keep saving a snapshot. Saving a snapshot, because what it'll do is it'll take you back to the last place you were. Otherwise, it's like the early days of the internet where you disappear down a rabbit hole and get lost and go off on a tangent. So on the right, we've got hashtags. So now we know which hashtags to set up in our tweet deck quickly. We can set up Paris raids, Paris attacks, Saint-Denis, Iran update, there's Google alert, there's all kinds of hashtags happening. On the right-hand side is a stream of recent tweets as the story is unfolding, and then at the bottom, what we've got are links. What we have are links to stories that are getting the most traction. So very often those are agencies, and those are the stories that you really want to be looking at. It's a really, really, really powerful tool, and my advice to you is when a story breaks, this is your go-to tool. Ultimately, at the heart of Twitter lies a hashtag, and if you can find the right hashtag, you'll get very quickly to the heart of it. Now, the beauty of this tool is you'll notice that I didn't search a Paris attacks hashtag. I searched as a Google search, Paris attacks. So this has the ability to search both hashtags and words. It's included, I tweeted earlier, I'm at RAYJOE, and I tweeted a link to a bunch of Twitter tools and resources, how to use lists, how to use hashtags. If we can go on next, Chris, I'd like to talk now about verification.
Okay, just before that, we've got a question from Ash Sholane. Yeah. What are the best newsrooms for social media policy? I'm assuming you mean what are the best newsrooms who've set out a social media policy. So I shamelessly stole my last one from the BBC, Reuters, especially Reuters, and the New York Times. So I mean, you can basically, the rule of thumb is whichever the newsrooms are that you deem to be reputable, they will have a good newsroom policy. But I do recommend you go to the Mail and Guardian. The one they've got at the bottom of their page is a kind of nice summation, and it's slightly localized as well, depending on which part of the world that question came from.
Here's another question. How much control should a newsroom editorial management have over a reporter's personal account if it's linked to the brand?
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting question. I mean, so basically, no matter what you do, even if you do have a disclaimer next to your personal account saying, this is going to do with the publication I work for, inevitably you are associated with that publication if you're a good journalist. And no matter what you do on your personal account, that will reflect on the brand you work for. So I don't think it's a question of control over your social media accounts. I think it's a question of if your editors have extended you the responsibility and the trust to represent them in the world in general, you have to understand you're representing them on social media as well. I mean, I had a terrible thing at the Mail and Guardian. In fact, it was the previous editor's problem. I was only the online editor then, next problem, which was that one of our interns who'd been there for a month got involved in a massively anti-Semitic discussion on Facebook. And he'd been there for a month. I mean, he wasn't at all trained yet. He wasn't part of the newsroom properly yet. On his personal account, he got into this massive discussion, and all over the news was the claim that we were an anti-Semitic newspaper. And you can't say, well, actually, this guy's only worked for a month. It's his private account. You are associated with the people who work for you, and you are associated with the brand you work for. So I'm saying they shouldn't have control, but the same HR principles will apply if you are out in the world and do something crazy. That's the same principle that applies in social media. I mean, other people might have different ideas, but I think that's the only way to still have authenticity of being able to talk to your audience is to be given the freedom to do so. But you also have to understand that trust goes two ways. Okay, I'm going to take you to, where am I taking them to, Ray?
This accuracy and accountability checklist.
Oh, okay. Maybe you just want to tell them about that.
So one of the things in the list of resources that I've put, that I've tweeted a link to, those are not necessarily all of my resources. All of them are fully attributed. So Journalism 101, attribute. Feel free to share this wherever you like. Don't remove the attribution. Twitter, Twitter is all about openness and about sharing. If you want to be closed, go to Facebook. I think,
well, in fact, we've actually just had a question from somebody saying, I'm on Facebook, why should I bother? Why do I need Twitter? I'll take a stab at answering that first, because I think it's kind of what you were talking about now.
News breaks first on Twitter.
I was going to say news breaks first on Twitter, but Twitter boy, you broke it before me. Absolutely. News breaks first on Twitter. Twitter's a much more open universe. They're sharing different kinds of information. Other most important thing is, if your readers are on Twitter, you have to be on Twitter. You can't say, I'm happy to stick around on Facebook. That's like saying I'm happy to work for a print newspaper for the rest of my life, because that's going to be a very short and brutish life. So you have to be on Twitter because that's where your audience is, and that's where news happens. Different news happens on Twitter to on Facebook at different speeds. You've got to be there.
So the other thing is Facebook makes it very, very difficult to search and to dig into it. Whereas with Twitter, I think you need only look at, again, I use a current example, which is what happened in Paris, and compare the way the news was breaking on Twitter with short Vimeo videos, with tweets, with photographs, and it's a very, very quick way to find sources and to get to sources. But again, as journalists, I need to say, if you're not prepared to say it to someone's face, if you're not prepared to write it in the sky, don't say it. Think twice before you think 3 times before you tweet once. It's really, really important. And I think the other thing is, something happens with some journalists' brains. They go a bit soggy with social media. They would never ever hand in a story for publication, for broadcast, if they hadn't done it properly, if they didn't have multiple sources, if they hadn't verified it. And yet what you're suddenly getting are people just retweeting without thinking. I guess what it is the instinct is to be first. Rather be late than be wrong. Because what happens is we spend a lifetime building up a reputation, and we can really throw that reputation away in a single tweet, in a single post. And Twitter is a very, very unforgiving space. My daughter, who's also a journalist, has this lovely thing that she says about Twitter, and it's said half seriously. It's like living on a street of glass houses where people are constantly throwing stones at you. And there's this real pack mentality there. And I suppose it goes back to something that Chris said earlier, is don't feed the trolls. The more you respond, they're getting the reaction that you want. And what you're really doing is you're throwing your name away in public. And we can't afford that. But I'd like to talk just very briefly about before you tweet. So the first question is, you're asking yourself, how do I know this information? Is this information independently confirmed? Should I first confirm it before I retweet? So one of the things is, for example, you tweeting the New York Times, the Times of London, the South African Sunday Times, you would hope that they have actually done proper verification. And for those of you who don't know, anything that has a blue tick, Twitter has actually gone and verified themselves that they are who they say they are. It can go wrong. Last year or the year before, I'm not sure when. So Twitter doesn't get hacked. People get conned into giving up their passwords, just like your bank account gets hacked. Be very careful of a site that asks you to fill in your Twitter account and details. So what happened is the AP account, I think it was AP, in fact I'm sure it was AP, tweeted, a bomber's gone off in the White House and President Obama has been injured. Over the next 5 minutes, the Dow went into free fall. AP realized, the first thing you should do when you realize your account has been compromised is immediately go and change your password. If you notice that someone else's account is tweeting stuff that they wouldn't normally tweet, breast enlargement, lose weight, any of that nonsense. They are not seeing it. It's really good Twitter just to tell them their account is doing it. Go and change it. But let's make sure, should we verify it? Do I know what the location of the news is? Check a map. Very simple. You've got Google. I mean, these days, many years ago, what you had to do is go and do your research in a library with pieces of paper. Now you've actually got Google that you can go in and out as you're writing and hyperlink to. Will what I've tweeted, will it require follow-up tweets to better explain it? And do I know the story well enough to follow up? But sometimes it's very difficult. Well, it's difficult to tell a story in one tweet. So I use Twitter, by the way, to teach people to write. It's a very, very good discipline, giving a 1,000-word story and asking people to give you a synopsis in 5 tweets. Try the exercise yourself. Keep doing it. You'll find your writing will improve. And my other tip on writing a tweet is write what you want to say first and then edit. It's very difficult to write to 140 characters. Get down what you want and edit, and it really will improve your writing. Okay, now when we're tweeting, are proper names spelled correctly? Are we spelling the name of a city properly? Are we spelling a person's name properly? Remember, this is our reputation as the journalist. Does the tweet go to the right place, and is it shortened properly? So before you tweet, before you retweet, click on the link. There's no excuse for retweeting something without reading what you retweeted. We had an incident, for those of you who are not in South Africa, is a member of the parliament posted a link which someone did a screen grab of and put onto Twitter, where some journalist had written a post in praise of one of the apartheid prime ministers. She lost her job over that. Her excuse was, I never read to the end of the post. It's not going to work, eh?
If I can ask you a question there.
Yeah.
What happens if you do make a mistake?
So the first thing you should do is, when you make a mistake, is correct it immediately. And the best way to do a correction to a tweet is to do it as a reply to your original tweet, so that the correction and the tweet are linked. That's really important, because rather correct it before people find you out. And don't delete it. People like us are out there doing screen grabs. And the moment that a tweet is retweeted, it becomes a new tweet. So even if you delete it, you can't delete the retweet. So immediately, hashtag correction. I do it in capital letters. I say what the correction is, but I do it as a reply to the tweet with an error, so that they linked at all times.
What if it's so awfully embarrassing you can't bear to not delete it?
No, well, tweets live on. It won't go away. Rather fess up and admit what your mistake was. People will respect that more by deleting it. So the tweet that Chris showed you earlier with the swearing about the president getting a new jet, that tweet was deleted within a matter of moments. I can tell you that multiple people retweeted it because they did a screen grab. And in the tools that I've given is a Chrome and a Firefox extension that lives in your browser that you can immediately go and do that screen grab.
I mean, maybe just one other thing on that is that then you have to really go into, if you've made a mistake on Twitter, you have to go into overdrive. You have to answer every single person, no matter how crazy they are.
Yeah.
And I've had so much experience of when one of my guys has made a mistake. I've never done it myself, of course. But when my guys makes a mistake, of then having to take over and having to stay awake a whole weekend. Because the other thing about Twitter is that you might be in South Africa, for example, and you think it's okay to go to sleep at midnight, but a lot of your readers will be from other time zones. So you have to treat Twitter as a 24-hour beast if you're going into overdrive and damage control. You can't go to sleep and wake up the next morning like that poor, no, I'm saying poor, like that woman who got into a plane in Heathrow and tweeted something stupid and racist, got on the plane, slept comfortably, well, not that comfortably because it's a plane, for 11 hours, gets to Cape Town and bang, like a whole life is over basically.
There'd been a Twitter storm.
Yeah, you've got to keep on it.
So she tweeted, I'm going to South Africa, I hope I don't get AIDS, and then said, oh, I'm white, I won't. Kind of a sick joke, fell flat. And her immediate response to that was to delete her account.
Yeah.
Whether she could have repaired the damage after, because she was on a transatlantic flight when it all came down. But she did the worst possible thing, is she deleted the account, put her head in the sand, and pretended it never happened.
Yeah.
So are any Twitter handles included in your tweet? Remember that you can make contact and be in the face of people on the other side of the world who don't know you just by including their Twitter handle. Make sure that it's going to the right account. The best way to find the correct account is to Google the person's name plus Twitter, and then go through, make sure I know my name, Raymond Joseph. There are multiple of us. Make sure you're talking to the right person, you're linking the right person.
I see we only have 3 minutes left, so maybe I should...
So this thing that I'm reading is called Accuracy and Accountability Checklist for Social Media. It's from zombiejournalism.com, and it's in the folder, the link that I tweeted, and there's also one about how to verify a tweet by Craig Canali. Print them out, hang them on the wall, use them, follow the steps. It's easy to make a mistake.
Yeah. So I just want to do one more thing, which is to ask Ray to tell us about lists very quickly, because we've discovered that even though lists seem to be such an obvious thing to use.
Do you have lists?
Yeah.
Or we can go to my account if you don't.
Well, I do, but I think we probably don't have time to show those.
So think of a list, think of a filing cabinet in your office. In the filing cabinet you have drawers. Inside the drawers you have files. Each file could be is a separate list. At Radio, if you go and have a look at my name, you'll find multiple lists, and it's a way to again sort the news from the noise. I've given instructions again in that folder about how to find lists. Sorry, how to set up a list. Lists, you've got to be proactive. You go to them, they don't come to you. Investigative journalists, if you're monitoring someone, it's a bit creepy, but what you can do is, if you don't follow someone and you add them to a list and you make your list private, they will never ever know that you are following them, that you are looking at them. But I have multiple lists. Again, if you're going to have a look at Radio, look at lists. My default when a story breaks is to immediately build a list. I've got an obsession with space. I've got a list of astronauts. I've got multiple countries. It's really a way of, again, sorting the news from the noise and filtering it down to a subject. Because Twitter is very, very, very transient. You miss it, it's gone. And I wouldn't try and keep up with Twitter, because you'll actually drive yourself crazy. But please go and have a list. There's a very good instruction on how to set them up. Use them. It will actually improve your experience, and you'll be using Twitter far, far better. Hashtags and Twitter, the secret source. Hashtags and lists are the secret source of Twitter. If you're using those two, you are sitting with a very, very, very powerful weapon as a journalist.
Okay, thanks very much for listening to us and watching our presentation.
Any last questions?
I don't think we have time for last questions, but if you do have questions, just tweet me at Chris Roper, or Ray's at Ray Joe, and then Haji, who you couldn't hear, but was providing us with information on chat. So thank you very much for that, Haji. She's at Sage of Absurd, but you can, I'll retweet her handle for you. And then I just want to tell you that on December 9th is the next webinar, and that's going to be given by Nasser Ul-Hadi, who is also an ICFJ Knight Fellow. He works at the Hindustan Times. Very cool, very clever guy. So he's going to be talking on the digital supply chain. So make sure you catch that December 9th, but we'll tweet the hell out of that before it happens. So make sure you're following us on Twitter. Thanks very much, and thanks to Jefferson Mock, who is our producer back in Washington, for making things run fairly seamlessly. Right, any more questions you have? Zap us on Twitter. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.